And I don't even have my camera on. How embarrassing! And welcome to this week with the podcast, special edition with the police sergeant. He's also a colonel in the Army National Guard and president of the International Brotherhood of Police Officers, Local 140, the one of the unions that represents police officers in the city. Rick Cipro, thank you very much for doing this.
Hey, Tom, hey, thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it. Be able to come on your show and really reach out to the people of our community here in Worcester and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe some people will stop branding me anti-police when it's not true now.
No, we've had some good conversations, over the last few months, and you're about accountability, and I totally understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. First, I wanted to myself and hopefully viewers learn a little bit about how the police union operates. Most of us have never had the opportunity to work with unionized folks. You've been head of you are head of the union that represents sergeants, lieutenants, and captains, correct?
Currently, yes.
Yeah, and you were once the patrolman union's president as well, right?
I was, yes.
So this has been going on. This president thing has been going on. How long now?
So I've been actively involved with both unions since 1996. I became a police officer in the city of Worcester in 1994, and decided to get involved with the union activities. So really, since then, I was a vice president of the patrolmen's union. Then I became the president, got promoted, and then worked on the collective bargaining teams for the police officials, and then ran for president, and then was elected to that, and then been there. So really, all in all, in the last basically almost 29 years, I've been involved with the union, police union here in the city of Worcester. Was it 4 city managers, 6 police chiefs, 3 different human resources. So I've been around for quite a while dealing with all the activities here in the city.
Absolutely, and obviously, those are elected positions when you're elected the head of the union.
Yes.
I was at City Hall last night when the newest contract for your union was approved by the city council. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. That's a hard-fought battle. So just when you talk police unions in general, like people, always think of the unions, the Teamsters. You think United Auto Workers and whatnot. But really, back, the police unions really started back in the 1920s after the Boston police strike, right? When the police went on strike and it caused a whole bunch of problems. So they, laws came into effect that, police couldn't strike. So they decided to unionize. And really, it's about just like any other union, right? It's about your rights. It's about your benefits and your pay and your allowance to make sure that, you make enough money to take care of your families. So really, that's what it's all about. I know some people look at us, we're always trying to, get over, but we're about accountability too. We work with the city. Management has many, many rights. Unions are not the be all end all in policing. But we do fight for our officers just like any other union would, right? Just because you're a police officer doesn't mean that you lose your rights, that you do have your due process rights that are afforded to everybody. And we just want to make sure that that is part of that process. So yeah, doing it for so long, there's been, a lot of things I've dealt with. But I couldn't be, working with, I think really the key is being able to work, doing this for so long, I've been able to work with all the different city managers, all the different police chiefs, and, really, I think help professionalize and move our police department forward.
So, I mean, obviously a big part of the responsibility of the union is, as you said, like negotiate pay and benefits, et cetera. When it comes to working conditions or, as you said, like due process rights in the right in the case of, I mean, the obvious one's discipline, but I'm sure that there's a million different scenarios where due process comes into effect. I mean, outside of you hire a lawyer, you have your own lawyer, but I mean, what's your role in kind of advocating for?
So my role is to advocate to the city and to the police to fully fund us what we need. When I talk working conditions, right? So that is properly equipping, right, and training us so we have it, right? So make sure we have back in the day, right, our cruisers didn't have air conditioning. We have to bargain that into the contract. It's still in the, that all cruises will have air conditioning. Right. Make sure we have the latest, tools that we need. Right. Again, because we talk about, de-escalation. Well, we have to make sure we have those proper tools and that proper training so we can properly de-escalate. So, we used to have the little 12-inch batons, right? They were made of wood. That was the standard back then. Then as policing and more professionalizes, different types of technologies come in, they realize, hey, that wasn't good for someone who might be under arrest that decides to possibly assault a police officer, but also for a police officer. So then they went to expandable batons, revolvers to semi-automatic weapons, radios for everybody, right? All the way up to the current body cameras that we have, right? We're a very big proponent of having those body cameras. So those are part of that working conditions, also internal working conditions. Our police department is very old. It was designed in the 60s, built in the 70s. Every day an elevator breaks. There's people that get stuck in the elevators. We don't have our showers aren't working. So that's a working condition for us. Like, hey, we need to fix this building. And my job is to work with the chief, work with the city council and the city manager to get the proper funding, right? It's not only our pay. When I talk benefits, right, and working conditions, we have to understand that some of that money has to go to our equipment, our cruises, our building. And that's all part to make sure that, it's all about having a professional police department. You wouldn't want to walk in and work at a place that had ceiling tiles falling, water leaking, elevators not working. What does that do to someone's personal morale? So, it's all part of that too, though, Tom,
Yeah, right. And then to imagine there's a feeling of, especially when you're stuck in an elevator, you probably feel very underappreciated.
Happened a lot.
No. One thing that confuses me, or I probably just a lack of knowledge on public unions, right? Mm-hmm. Private unions, they can, there's always the threat of we'll just walk out, mm-hmm. And obviously you can't do that, right? Public unions are prohibited by law to do that. So. I'm not trying to get into the details of your negotiation, but I mean, just in a general sense, like, what is the leverage? That seems like the biggest leverage point. There's always that threat you can walk away in a private unit, right. And you don't have that. So, like, what do you leverage to in negotiation?
Our leverage is going to the public. Right. Our leverage is actually because public safety, you hear it all the time, whether it's the elected officials, every election cycle, no matter what it is, you're hearing it today. Right. It's about public safety. So we leverage that, hey, your police officers are not being treated fairly. They're not being paid a fair wage. We're not getting the proper equipment, the proper training, whatever it may be. And we go out to the public and we do a public messaging campaign. And then we do that through the city councilors too, because many of them campaign on public safety. So we try to hold their feet to the fire. And that really, truly is our only leverage. The other leverage that we have is like the threat of going to any type of dispute, of going to what they call the Joint Labor Management Committee. Now, I always look at, if we have to go to a third party, I look at it as a failure on me to try to come to some type of an agreement and on the city, because now we have to bring a third party in. Now, sometimes you may have to. But I think that we can get things done at the table. But that's really our leverage. We go to the public. We leverage the public and public safety and what we need. We do it. We've done it all the time. We did it years ago with the cruises we needed. We took pictures. We did meetings. We showed people the type of cruises we had. We ended up getting some new cruises. Now they have a process in place where they try to replace them as regularly as they possibly can. We brought the city council to our police station and showed them. Now, the city manager, I think at Augusta started maybe it was Eric, I'm not sure, a team or a building maintenance working group or something like that to try to get to buildings. But, our building, I'm telling you, our building's falling down. So we're constantly talking to them about those. That's our only leverage we truly have is the public. And we appreciate the public because really we get a lot of support.
And that also makes it make a lot of sense why, other unions that are, whatever they may be, administrative folks at City Hall or something, well, they don't, the public isn't going to be actually very inspired if they go to the public. So right. It makes sense now. Yeah. You mentioned something I had never heard of, and I lost it already. Are you not like when you have a grievance or some sort of you think there's been a violation? You don't. We've heard a lot about this lately with all the union activity that's been Starbucks, etc. With complaints to NRLB, which is a federal
Yep.
National Labor Relations Board. Is that you mentioned something else there? Is
Joint Labor Management, the Joint Labor Management Commission. So that's by law here in Massachusetts under 150E. And it comes in for dispute resolution for anything that are contractual grievances. And also through the process, arbitration process for any type of disciplinary actions. So when there's a problem, with that, we have to go through the Joint Labor Management Commission. Normally, we settle them in the city 9 times out of 10. There have been some where they have to go to arbitration for a third party where we just can't come to an agreement with the city. Many of those are probably more disciplinary type cases than just contractual language type things that we're working on. We can usually come to a resolution with them. There have been a few where we've had to go forward. Back in the day under Chief Gardella, they tried to make us, wasn't part of our contract, and you have to bargain with us when you change a working condition, and they wanted to make us truant officers. And there were truant officers already in the city that work for the schools. But then they said, hey, we're going to make the police truant officers. Well, we filed an unfair labor practice, went all the way up, and we were successful in saying that, no, you couldn't add that without bargaining. And I'm talking, this was in the late 90s when I was there. And we bargained, and we actually ended up getting, people don't like it, but we actually getting a stipend for being a truant officers that we go get. We no longer do that. Right. It was one of these things that you have a problem with schools and they're like, hey, who's out on the street every day? Well, the police are. Let's make them truant officers. Yeah, that's not our job. Right. And what's that do? What's that say to the youth? Right. We're coming to pick them up and grab them and bring them, so some of these great ideas that people have doesn't fare well for us, for especially in the public. Right. We look at it as the bad guys, but also sometimes we're the easy button.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with that. That it's almost long hanging fruit to kind of pick a fight with the police department at this point. I'll agree with that. I think some of those fights are worth having, but some aren't. And I want to actually pick up a little bit later on all the things that the police officers or departments are asked to do.
It's a lot,
but yeah, and I'm going to approach that in an interesting way. That I think will surprise you. But I just want to wrap up on union stuff. So you represent how many people currently about?
So currently there's 89 sergeants, lieutenants, and police captains.
Gotcha.
Do not represent the deputy chiefs or the chief. They're separate. They are not union affiliated. They're considered executive management. So local 504 is what we have. And the police officers currently have, I think they only have like maybe 320 something. I think they're authorized almost 380. We're down about 60 police officers
right.
in the city, at least that.
Right. Yeah. And I am, especially in the private sector, I think that unions are probably the only way they're, kind of working class P folks are going to improve themselves, right? I don't think it's going to really happen from government. I think it's going to have to happen like from direct action and people banding together and negotiating. But people, get upset about salaries or, the list of money comes out every year and people, and I think there's reasonable conversations to have there, but your job's to represent your members.
My members.
Right. Much like actually made this point recently. Much like a corporation its purpose is to return for its investors, not to be to have the public interest, to act the public interest or whatever it is. Your job's to represent your members, and you're elected to do that.
I'm elected to do that. I get my, we have our meetings. We go to the membership. We get their priorities, what our members are looking for. We call them, of course, to things that are reasonable, and then we work on those, throughout the year or any type of given moment. Believe me, I get phone calls every single day, right? But I'm like, hey, yeah, that's nothing. We can't do that.
No, you can't have a personal helicopter.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just certain things that people, hey, it is just a lot of different nuances to it, and people don't really realize, that there's a whole clause in every contract called management rights, and the management has a right to run the organization as they see fit, right, within parameters, within our collective bargaining, whatever. And the management right clause can be, very, very tight, very, very restrictive. And I have to often remind people of that.
Yeah. And like, how often are you in a room with all of your members? I mean, with 80 people, that's different than thousands, right? I mean, imagine.
Yeah, so we try to have union meetings. So the police. I'll tell you this, right? When I was the police officer president, and the current one will probably say the same thing. It's very busy. There's things going on all the time with police officers. Just normal things, right? Somebody calling in sick too much, like whatnot. With the police officials, it's a little bit different. I rarely have like those type of cases. I have some discipline cases, but not, depends on, what exactly transpired. Ours is different. We're supervisors. So I might be like a lack of supervision or something, or do you know the rules and regulations, making sure you know the policies, policy mishaps, things like that, maybe retrainings, different things like that we try to get our members for. So it's a lot different, because really when you get to the captain level, and we have 8 captains, like they're running the department, right? Pretty much on a daily basis, right? So they very rarely, there's very rarely anything happens to a captain, right? Because they're that next level, right? It's just making sure that our working, a lot of my stuff is working conditions, really, with the pay, allowances, and working conditions with the police officials.
Yeah, it seems like I don't want to say middle management, because that has a negative connotation, I think. But captains seem like, it seems like the deputy chiefs and the chief, of course, is kind of the executive management level, and captains is like the top of the on the street level, if you will, right? Is managing people that are on the street doing the actual work.
They set the policy. Captains make sure we understand it, and we have to then enforce it with our patrol officers. So, and then we have to abide by and know them, right? So,
right.
And I think that's a very important piece. And we might talk civil service later, and I'll tell you why I think that's very important. That's not included in civil service, right? For testing purposes, right? But we can talk that later. But that's a very important piece. Understand that we know, and as you go up, like if you're a captain, you should know also a lot of the ordinances of the city of Worcester, those upper level type of maybe alternative dispute resolution type things that might happen with EEO complaints, these type of things, those upper management pieces. Then that middle management, I look at like lieutenants maybe as a like the middle management piece. And the sergeants really are those supervisors on the ground, really trying to enforce all that.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue to let's get to some stuff. We let's have some disagreement. This
we haven't disagreed. A couple of times we talked, we really haven't disagreed. So I don't know.
No, I would like to think that we're human beings. So even when we disagree, we don't have to scream at each other.
Right.
I wrote about, and I think a lot of people in the city are at least aware of a civil service related dispute with the deputy chiefs. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw my piece, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy. I think the interim chief has earned the appointment to chief, and I was skeptical at first. I was as skeptical as you could be. I so far, I think very good. Especially with his presence in the community, like he can't go to anything, he's not there, and he's also not walling himself off. There's not 10 cops around him, so nobody can get to him. I mean, you can walk up to him and talk to him if you want it, and he'll listen. Yes. And I think that's super important. But in a general sense, a bubble test might prove that no regulations, no law, no policy, but if you can't execute any of that, under pressure, or you don't have the temperament, I know that there's other tests, psychological tests or whatever, but it seems like a bubble test being very important in being hired and promoted, it seems ludicrous to me for police work.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, though, as you know. Let me start with this, right? So let me say this. So there's two parts we're kind of talking about, right?
Yep.
Civil service in general, and then civil service maybe for promotion and hiring, right? So I believe in civil service protections, right? It offers those protections that came in by law, right? There's a lot of different protections in there for people that have disabilities, for people that are veterans, and then also your basically your employment rights. Now we talk about employment rights, and I'll get into that a little bit. So and I'll tell you why that's kind of important. Mm-hmm. So that's two separate issues, I think. So I like to talk about, I believe in the civil service concept. And if you have those same protections built into your collective bargaining agreement, then maybe you could look at possibly leaving civil service, but you got to be very careful with that, right? Because there is a cost to that. And I'm saying it's a monetary cost to the city of Worcester. So, civil service in general, right? I think it's, people say it's an archaic system. I believe it is. I don't think people have opened the books on that. Just like our charter, which we haven't opened the books on civil service to look at the laws and how things have changed over time. So can it be restructured? Yes. Now, for hiring purposes, there's a very lengthy process. Can that be shortened? I believe it can. Right. Many times the city of Worcester is waiting on civil service to provide what they need, right, what they have to do before we can move on through the process. That's why it takes almost 6 to 8 months to hire somebody. And it is absolutely crazy that it takes that long. And then from that point, then it's another, 6 months in the police academy. So by the time you get authorized X amount of slots, we get a civil service list, we start moving forward. It could be a year and a half before you see the police officers on the street. That needs to change. That needs to change how they do business for the hiring process. Now, the test, I haven't taken a civil service entry-level exam in some time. But I think that they've changed the way it is on the bubble test. There's different types of questions. So and I can't speak to that, but I love to speak about civil service and promotions because I believe, and I agree with you, an 80-question bubble test. They give me 15 books to read. I have to know all the laws, the constitutional law, the Massachusetts constitutional law, all the criminal laws, all these different books. My opinion, for a police sergeant, I don't have to know. I have to know my laws, but there's a lot of stuff they put in there that I don't think is pertinent to being a police leader, a police supervisor. So is there a better way to do it? I believe there is. I believe that you can have a test, but also an assessment piece to it, right? And then also what you have done in your career, like a training and experience piece. So it's a 3-part piece that will then, you can take the test, you pass the test, and you qualify for phase 2, which is the assessments. And then you'll be put in a room and you get put in through an assessment, through a third party that comes in and runs you through whatever scenarios. Then they take your training experience and they use points for that. Now, is that a way to do it? I believe that is a better way to do it. We've started to do that with the captains. So years ago, we agreed to an assessment for lieutenants to captains. However, the captains and it's just an assessment, which we don't like. So we're trying to fix that with the city. The assessment alone, and from the people that have taken it, have come back and told me that it's not a very good process. They don't think it's a fair process. And I don't know if it's because of the way the assessment team does it and whatnot. The last assessment, there was a lot of issues. They were supposed to do like a priority basket. They couldn't do it because they couldn't get the computers to work. They were supposed to they couldn't do this. So everything was truncated. It is what it is. It came out the way it is, but it's not a very good system. So we are working with the city to change that. I'd love to see, a test that the city develops that has the constitutional law, criminal law, juvenile law, all the motor vehicle laws, right? But also our policies and procedures of the police department, rules and regulations, maybe at different levels, like I talked about the city ordinances. How do you do some, ADR, with EEO complaints, like all these different type of things that I think that you need as a police, as a police supervisor. One of my biggest problems I have in policing, and I'll caveat this because you mentioned I'm in the Army, right? So I've been in the Army a very long time, and I'm a military police officer in the Army. One thing I believe that we do not do well in policing in general as an enterprise is we do not develop strategic leaders, right, for the future. There's some organizations out there. Yeah, you go to the FBI Academy for X amount of weeks. You can do this, right? But there's not these requirements that you should be able to do. In the military, I have to do this, get a broadening assignment, come back, do some command, go here, go work on a staff, and all these stuff. And that's how I get promoted. I get evaluated. I get assessed. I have to go to school, and I do all these things, and then you can finally get promoted. I think a military-like model would be great for policing, but I think it's be very difficult to get there because of because we are a constitutional republic with 50 different states that have their own rules and their own regulations. The only way to do that, and I'm not talking about making a national police force. I don't think that is something that you need, but there is a way I believe that the feds can maybe get involved to say you need to do X, Y, Z. To become a police leader. They do it in the UK. They do it some other places. I've done some extensive research on it, actually. So I wrote a paper on it. I believe that we have to do a better job of it. Now we're starting to, right? We're starting to develop, and a lot of times the person has to do it themselves, and that's good for them. Like someone you just mentioned, like, Chief Saucia, right? Like he's out there, he's gone to all these different schools. He's done this all on his own to be the police leader that he is. And I believe he is a strategic police leader, actually. His vision, when I talk about, we have to be ready for the new technologies, the new things that are coming down, just everything that's changed in policing in the last, several years. How are we going to move forward with that? How are we going to make our changes internally and externally? You got to have that strategic vision to do that. I believe, Chief Saucia does have that, and I think you may agree at somewhat. Out there, he's doing what he needs to do. So, but that's how you have to do it. Like you can't work in a vacuum. You can't do these things. So, I really believe that civil service has a place, but I do believe that the testing absolutely needs to change. Now, what's interesting, it is in this contract right here, where we just finished, we did agree to a working group on developing performance evaluations. So we're going to sit down with the city. We're going to be looking at that over the next, X amount to figure out how can we bring performance evaluations into the police force. We'll see. I think it's going to be quite an endeavor, but it's not impossible. But since it's never been here, it's going to take a little bit to develop. And then what are we going to do with the performance evaluations, right? That's the unanswered question. What are they going to be for, right? So
yeah. I mean, you'd imagine. So first of all, our city does not do well with change sometimes. So I'm sure it will be a difficult process. But I wasn't aware that there wasn't performance evaluations, and that seems a little insane to me. I mean, where's even in the corporate world, when you're not dealing with the public or whatever your job might be, you do performance evaluations. There's supposed to be an educational process about trying to learn where you're coming short, where maybe training is needed or whatever. But I mean, it's supposed to be an evaluation. It's not supposed to be the guillotine. And so, yeah, that's a little crazy to me that
I agree, right? And I totally agree. It's not a guillotine. It help you to either fix yourself, fix the department, help us move forward. And it's like, hey, how do you become better at your profession? And again, I use them quite extensively in my military side, have for over 30 years. I think, there's a place for them, but what are we going to use them for, right? The federal government been using performance evaluation for a very long time, but they're incentive based. So you do a good job, you put out your objectives, right? What you're going to do, then you tell them I met these objectives or I didn't. You sit with your supervisor. And then, but it's an incentive-based thing where you can get additional days off. You can maybe jump a step. Maybe there's a cash bonus. Like, there's incentives though for it. So, what's the incentive that the city's willing to offer? I have no idea because we haven't talked about it yet. But.
Well, and so, I mean, it was another lifetime ago, but I was a tech recruiter on the corporate side for a bunch of years, 15 years. And so I wasn't an HR person. I wasn't necessarily intimately intertwined with the process, but I mean, I understood, the evaluation process. And at least what I had seen, it was tied to like, this is how your raise is going to be determined on your performance evaluation. It wasn't about getting better. It was about, we only want to give you 2% or 3%, not 5%. So we want to, whittle down your performance evaluation. And it became not about evaluation. It became, almost positioning over finances. Right. And so I don't know, incentives what I'm trying to get at is incentives as related to performance evaluations can almost have a negative effect. It can make the whole process not become about evaluating and getting better, which should be the point, I think.
And it's all about the person doing the evaluation too, right? So there's that give and take to make sure they understand how to do the evaluation process appropriately and provide that feedback. And really, you can't just do an evaluation, in my opinion, right? I said to the manager when we were talking about this, I go, hey, listen, I go, I'm kind of for this, right? I go, but like, we don't even have a position. We don't have position descriptions in the police department. I go, that's the first order of business. What's the duties and responsibilities of a police officer? What's the duties and responsibilities of a police captain, right? Those have to be developed. They're loosely defined, but they're not in a position description. So then I go, because how else can I tell you what my objectives are going to be? So the police chief, right, will give his goals and objectives, and all the way down, it should flow.
What are you trying to achieve? You don't know because you don't even know what the position you're in is supposed to do.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So there's a long way to go with this, but I think it'll be good if we can actually get it done in 10 years from now, when I'm long retired.
Get it done at the speed of government, as my friend Mark Henderson always says.
Speed of government. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, so my gripe, and we talked a bunch about this, but my gripe with, as I mentioned, like, what's a bubble test tell you about the personality and ability to deal with people? Nothing. I mean, look, you can know all the laws, but if you treat everybody you encounter like garbage, that's not helpful, right? Yeah. And just to use an extreme example, and I think this is a mix of negotiated rights. Civil service has come into play in the city before, with when it's time to tell somebody, the Worcester Police Department isn't for you anymore. Sometimes it has to happen, and it seems like it is close to impossible. It's not impossible, but I mean, it from what I've read and heard from folks, it appears that the use of last chance agreements, which it seems from my research, at least to other departments I've looked at, we use a lot of last chance agreements in comparison. I think in the past. I don't. There's a bunch that are still in play here. They usually go for 10 years. And not every those can have their place, but when they're used because otherwise it's impossible to fire somebody, right? If they don't, or nearly impossible, which it appears to me at least that's the motivation to use these so much, because now you're signed a thing that says if I do something stupid again, I'm gone. Yep. And I think they've been overused and probably in situations where the situation isn't good that whatever occurred, and for the benefit of viewers, I'm not going to ask about specific instances because, of course, he couldn't talk about those because he represents some of those people, and that would be improper. That's why I'm beating around the bush here. But in situations that would appear that maybe termination is warranted, and city kind of seems to go with a last chance because it turns into a very expensive and very long process, and sometimes it doesn't go the city's way. And maybe it shouldn't always, right? But maybe the city needs to do better in how it hands out discipline. But when it becomes very difficult and a very expensive process to move on from somebody on the police department, that's problematic to me.
Well, again, we can't talk specific cases, but like it's not cookie cutter, right?
Yep.
Every case has its own particular,
Correct.
facts and that happen. So I think the city looks at all that. We look at that as a union. We also, and it's a risk analysis, right? It's a risk analysis that everyone takes. And I think the city does it with, lawsuits and whatnot. Is it better to do this and expend all this additional money with, we don't know? Or do we think that this person can be saved? Or maybe they feel that maybe this person will mess up again. And that's that, right?
Right.
So you got to take that out, because also you got to take into account the money that was spent on training those police officers too, right? So you got to look at it like, what did they do? Now, what type of cases? I don't want to talk specific cases, but there's different facts to each case. What's the risk analysis that's been done for that? And then, that, because that leads to that cost piece. And is this person, what was their record prior to that particular one incident maybe that happened? And what did we think that they, what type of police officer they are? So there's a lot of these different things that go into that. There hasn't been many last chance agreements, I don't think, lately. Like you said, some go back 10 years. I don't think there's been many as of late. I think the city, there's been a few cases where, believe me, I've had people just resign because we said that you're better off doing that, right?
Right.
We try to manage expectations, right? We try to manage expectations, and then we do go to the city, and we say you have a good case. We think you have a good case, or we think you have a weak case, and this is what whatever we're going to do as a union. We're just sticking up for the due process of our individuals to make sure they've done that, because there's been cases where the city has not given the due process that. So some things are technicalities, and then maybe we get the last chance agreement.
Yeah. And admittedly, I view this from a public confidence standpoint, right? If we're seeing these reports of what we believe is somebody on the police department doing the wrong thing, and okay, well, don't do it again for 10 years, and then we put them back out on the street. I can understand concern about that, right? I think that's a legitimate concern. And I think
but yes and no, right, Tom? I mean, like, someone gets a DUI when they're 21 years old, you're going to hold that against them the rest of their lives, right? So just in general public and different types of jobs, I know what you're going to say, but the accountability, the type of job that we have, right, is a little bit different than the regular person. And I totally agree with you, right? However, like, we're people too, right?
Yeah. Well, let's no, absolutely. Look, and look, I think that it's highly likely that there's a lot of trauma, given what police officers often see and deal with. That there's a lot of trauma.
We just had a police officer just leave because of trauma.
Yeah, and I'm not in touch with how much mental health is being provided from inside the police department, but whatever it is probably not enough.
It's not. We're trying to do better, right? I think you heard some of that talk maybe last night at the meeting, right, from Councilor King, and I've said it before. Like, he's brought that up before, and I appreciate his comments, even though he's not always a big police supporter, but I believe he's honest when he says that. So, and we are trying to do better. We're trying to do more peer support. We're trying to do more training for that. We do have they talked about that firefighter position they have. We have one in the police department already. He's been there for 20 years. And that's all he does. And now we're trying to do more peer support. We've had, especially after the couple losses that we've had over the last several years. And we're just trying to really build that network, better, right? So that we can recognize those that may need assistance, because it can be traumatic. Just recently, just going into these pedestrian accidents, it can be very traumatic. The last few that were, that happened, right, to these officers that first seen.
And any call, someone finds someone that's killed themselves, And I mean, it's almost certainly going to be a police officer who's the next person to walk in that room and see whatever occurred there. I don't think anybody should dispute that police officers often encounter horrific situations. And that leads to trauma. And trauma, I think in a general sense, like kind of our society is starting to understand how crazy trauma can have effects on people, right? I mean, it could affect behavior and mentality and just about everything about your psychological makeup. And that certainly can lead to situations, that end in some sort of disciplinary case, right? And it's hard to, separate that out. Like if that's if a situation is the product of something that was really built on the job, that's somebody that should be, we should seek counseling and, trying to deal with that whatever issues that person's dealing with. But at the same time, I get very hot about use of force cases when they appear to not be legitimate. Because I mean, that's just look, we give you guns and a badge, and you can literally take people's freedom away. And I think that when that's used in ways that appear to be just flagrantly wrong, it makes me crazy, right?
Listen, there's been plenty of instances around the country where things like
absolutely.
that happen, and it gives the police officer to do the good job every single day in and day out. But I always remind people that many type of police interaction, when it does become a little bit more assaultive, looks very violent to people. But we are trained in such a way where we try to use the least amount of force to affect compliance. And there's different levels that you move to depending on the assaultive behavior. But we're taught to use the least amount of force necessary to affect compliance.
Yeah, let's use something out of the state police a few years ago, just as an example, because you don't represent them. And that's I remember there was I don't know if it started in New Hampshire and ended up in Mass, but there was a very long on the pike, off the pike a few times, high speed chase.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And when he gave up, the guy gave up late on the ground, and the first cop that got to him gave him some UFC move. And I get it, he was pissed. Right? This guy just put a bunch of people in danger. They've been chasing this guy, probably put the officers in danger. They're operating at high speed and all that. That just can't happen, though. That just can't happen.
Yeah.
Did he deserve it? Sure, but did he
deserve it? Right? Did he deserve? The thing is, right? I was on camera. They had a helicopter over. I know exactly what you're talking about. Was that something we're taught and trained? Of course, it's not. Was that something that's out of policy and procedure? Of course, it was. And I think that trooper was disciplined. But you're right. The adrenaline goes, whatever. Now it's up to us. One thing that we train as supervisors, right, is that we try to, if someone's the lead car, like the one who initiates, right, like something, because they're the ones that are like kind of hopped up, right? I initiate this or whatever. We try to back them off and put someone else up, right? That has not that, and the supervisor needs to get there as quick as they possibly can to ensure that those people that like initiated the pursuit or initiated that action are kind of pushed away, and we bring the other people in. It's all part of the de-escalation, that we do. So that is somewhat new, right? That was some time ago. What you're talking about that. Yeah. But one of the things we try to do is we try to, like a supervisor, we're like, hey, go over, get out, get over there, right? It's time for you. We'll take care of it from here, right? Those people that weren't involved, because you do, someone's assaulting you, you're going to be amped up. So
absolutely.
Once that person's in compliance, hey, you're moving aside. We hand them off to somebody else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I understand what happened, right? I'm not saying I would be above such a thing, in that situation. You've been chasing this guy forever.
Well, we're supposed to be.
But
we're supposed to be, and I agree, we're supposed to be. But sometimes, yes, we're also human. That's why I say that, right? And your emotions and the things get to you, and you make that one bad decision, right? Yeah, it's a mistake of the head, really. Like, right. And then. And I'm sure he regrets it every day.
Yeah. I mean, that was just what came to mind.
Yep.
I don't think that person was, that's not the most serious situation. I don't think that person was necessarily seriously hurt in any way.
No, just
And
bad.
of course, when you have different injuries, we have people seriously injured and whatnot, then it kind of turns into a different thing. So it might not be the best example, but what I thought of. And this last thing on this, again, as far as Secret Service, civil service, and the kind of due process and attempts to terminate. And I know that officers get very upset when I say this, but it also seems crazy to me that folks can work 80 hours a week. And I understand that half of that, or a good portion of that, is going to be details, and that's where a lot of their income comes from.
Mm-hmm.
But look,
that's why I say, give us a fair wage. Give us a fair wage, and we won't have to work as much.
Yeah, I mean, look, I work probably around that, but I work at home and I sit on my behind and grow sideways, right? I'm not dealing with these situations, and so I could be, not that I am the negotiator, but I mean, I could be amenable to that. But we also can't do that and details and keep up details at this level. Like there's
a lot of overtime also, right? So you got to remember the things that we do, right? So number one, we're shorthanded. Number one. Number two is we have specialties, right? So our crash reconstruction unit can only be so big, and they've been very, very busy lately. Very busy.
They have.
So once you get on overtime, right, it's the same rules apply, but then they try to break it up, right? So but they still have to, if there's a murder,
you're going to work. Yeah.
People want us to catch the bad guy, right? Or bad girl, right? So like they're out there working. So it's overtime and the details. Now the details, yeah. All right. So, I can probably give you a bunch of different stories where, that detail officer, it's more police officers on the street. People might not always agree with us. Oh, they're on their phone. They're not paying attention. They're doing this, they're doing that. But I'm telling you, we've had many police officers who stopped bank robberies, who've saved people's lives, being the closest person there, choking babies, CPR, found suspects, like just being on the street. So pros and cons, 80 hours a week. I'll be honest with you, I never did that, right, in my career.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, I just, I just never did. But there are people that work the 80 hours for a variety of reasons. Maybe they have multiple kids in college. Maybe they have this, right? And I have no problem telling people, like, you think that we make a lot of money, right? Like, I'm going to tell you, my average salary for the last 3 years is $116,000.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's partially. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's partially.
And I know people are going to say, "Well, the median income of this one is this and this and this." And Worcester is this, but I consider myself professional. I have multiple professional degrees. I have multiple professional certifications. In the private sector, I could probably make more money.
Oh, probably, yeah, probably. I agree with that. And no, I mean that is. More money than most folks make, but I don't think that that's crazy. I think that what gets people crazy is, when again the annual report,
the details.
I call that
details.
Yeah, well, the details. And I think I think the conversation about that is sort of misrepresented a lot. I mean, in the end, the city is paying for a lot of the road work and whatnot. Well, the city's paying at least for some portion of that. And then you have private businesses that are, bars and whatnot, that are also,
and the city gets,
I've done events before, and you have,
he gets 10%.
Well, I understand that. And that's good. I like that part. But I don't want to take food out of anybody's mouth. But it seems like we use details, and we use either, city money through contracts to contractors for, say, road work, and the kind of in private business to supplement getting police officers to a wage that they're happy with. And I think we should just deal with the root issue and not, and figure out what's the best way.
I totally agree with you on that, because I'm going to tell you, during negotiations, not this particular time, but in the past, people have said, well, you work details. And my argument was what I just said to you. Well, then pay us a fair wage and we won't have to.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I do understand when people, look at the list of, the annual complaint about the city time when the wages come out.
Yeah.
And, and they see people making, and it's not that they didn't earn it, right? They obviously working a ton. But they see people making, $300,000, $280,000 in their, patrol officers. And it's like, I think there's an aspect, I think it's reasonable to at least think about, is that you're starting to get to an income level where you're not identifying with the people that you're patrolling with, right? I mean, much different income than
I mean, I guess it's a conversation, depending on where you come from. But I'm going to tell you this. I think you're going to see those numbers change a little bit over time. Some of the newer, we have a problem filling details now. Many go unfilled. The newer offices today, right? Different mindsets, different whatnot, are not working as much as maybe some of the older guys were. And that was all, that was part of the details came in years ago, too, because, our wages have risen over time. There's no doubt about that. I firmly admit that. But,
we negotiated.
But we've negotiated, right? But to keep up with whatever. But with our professionalism is really what I talk about. But back in the day, it was a way them to make some extra money. Back in the day, they didn't even some police officers didn't work detail. They had second jobs as plumbers, stonemasons, whatnot. So most of our people do that on the outside. You got to remember, our fire brethren, right? With their work schedule, many of them they work other jobs outside of the fire, and I don't know what they make outside the fire. Do they work 80 hours a week? Maybe. I have no idea, right? But it's just because it's our public and the way the city does it. Teachers, right? Some of the teachers, they work other jobs. I know teachers that are bartenders and whatnot, right? So
absolutely.
But we cannot work really outside employment. We have to get special permission, and some of our outside employment is usually related to the police field as like a police trainer, maybe for the new post commission for the MPTC or these things. You have to get permission to do those type of things. So we have to actually get permission to do an outside employment. I'm not sure if the other unions do or not.
Yeah, I don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah. All right.
Because we have a lot of ethical violations, a lot of things we can't, I can't be a bartender, right? I can't serve people alcohol, right? I'm a police officer, right? I can't go do certain things because there's these ethical violations too that are there. So.
Yeah, and I suppose, God forbid, if you're a police officer and you're a bartender and you overserve.
Right. Exactly.
Oh my God, that's a scandal and a half. Yeah.
Right. We can't do those jobs. Those are that we just can't do them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think some of my civil service is it takes the management, the brain out of it, right? I think it's you're not evaluating this person for a whole bunch of things that are interpersonal or nuanced or I can't think of the word. Skills that are not necessarily thought of as what's intangibles, right? Not thinking about intangibles. It's all about you scored this, so you're first on the list.
Did you read this book? Did you memorize it? And did you do well on it? Right? I agree with you.
Some of that is necessary, and some of that's necessary for sure.
I agree with you. No, it's not necessary. Actually, it's some of the questions they ask are ludicrous. I'm telling you. I wish I could tell you. It's just ludicrous. And I believe that a test make sure you know all the laws, constitutional, right? Our criminal laws, our motor vehicle laws, our juvenile laws, our gun laws, making sure you know all those type of things, and our policies and our procedures. Then, boom, you do well there. Then you move on to the assessment phase, where you can maybe have some of that subjective, look at some of those intangibles if you have the right people doing those assessments. And then from there, then you add in your training experience, whatever. And now you come out with a list of people. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm not just making this up. This isn't just Rick Cipro saying this is the way we should do it. Other departments do it this way. Right?
Yes. Yeah,
Boston does it this way, right? State police do it that way already.
They haven't opted out of civil service though. Boston and
no, because you can do this. Civil service allows this type of testing.
Okay.
It just costs a little more money.
Yeah, it's I guess just to put it in context, again, in a past life when I was doing the tech recruiter thing, I was at one point working for a startup, 30 employees or something. And so they're spending money on engineers, they're building something for a telecom device. And, they're hiring engineers at then 130 was big money. Right. And, but every hire was crucial because they were venture funded. So they had a runway of this. And then if you get to the end of the runway and you don't have more money, bye-bye. Right. And I would find these people that on paper were perfect. And then they would come in and, the folks that had founded the place would talk to them. And the answer when they rejected somebody, it was almost always has no analytical skills, which means they can't think, right? The problem solving of it.
Yep.
And it's hard to test for that, right? Like that's them asking questions and interpreting the answers and the thought process involved, right? And that's not obviously a good example for police, but that's kind of the context I think it is. They made all the decisions on the interpersonal contact with people. In
the police, when you first get hired, right? So there's like two parts of the academy, we call it. So you go through the background process, and hopefully those people, certain people can get weeded out and whatnot. Then you go to the academy. So you have to do well in the academy, and you actually get rated in the academy. How well you perform. Now you pass everything or whatever, you're going to get through. Then there's the field training piece. And for that first year that you're on the job, you're basically on a probationary officer. And during that first year on the job, the city can let you go for the really minor things, or we can make you go back for training, or we can even make you go back to a full academy if we feel it's necessary, right? So, so that field training is phase 2 of academy. And we're really building up that program. It was kind of lackadaisical in the past, but the department has really decided to really build this up. I think these police officers just came out, graduated, whenever, I forget when they graduated, just came off FTO time. I know Chief Saucy is all about the FTO training, and I'm about the FTO training. I was a trainer for years. And
what is that?
The field training officer, FTO.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Got it.
I'm all about that because I think that we open ourselves up for liability if we don't have a good program.
Gotcha. Last thing I want to talk to you a bit about was it's now many months old, but I thought it was very interesting. The police equity audit.
Mm-hmm.
I think instructive that at least they feel like there's a whole bunch of data that's not being gathered that should, and I think there's a ongoing process to rectify some of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think you'll dispute data is important, right? It may not tell the whole story, but to do macro analysis on large data sets is important. But if I remember correctly, when we talked about this, you said the way the report was executed, I think it was about the access that the auditor, if you want to call him that, had because of credentials or something. Like, they didn't have access to as much data as they probably should have, and you thought that made the report a little.
So let me just say that I didn't think the report was that bad for the police department, right? To begin with. I also thought it was definitely missing pieces, and I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, so we're talking about the use of force in particular is what I think what you're kind of getting at. And some of those, he didn't have the proper credentials to get into some of the databases that he needed to to get access to those reports. So that's a piece of it. Also, a piece of it is the way that we also continue that our CAD systems, right, the systems that we have, the systems of systems that we have are antiquated. Right. And that's what I talk about, our building and not investing into the police department. Now is the time to do that so that we have the proper technologies so we can give that transparency, give that information out instead of us doing it on paper still. Right. Trying to figure out what this was. Now we're getting better. Right. We got some new technology with the cameras. We can see things better there. But we're looking to get a new CAD system. Computer aided dispatch and our record management system, right? So those all, then that way they can talk to each other, right? Because some systems, if they don't talk to each other, then you have to still do things manually and things can get lost. So we're trying to get those technologies into the police department so that we can be more transparent with that. I think using our crime analysis unit. Give them the proper tools that they have. I think they've done a better job. You saw Chief Saucy, he puts out the crime stats every week now. And using those, regardless of what people might say about the ShotSpotter Connect, that helps us with that. It drives where we need to do things and where we don't need to do things. And it's about resource and efficiency, right? With reduced resources, if we become more efficient, then we can do a better job. And there's a lot of controversy about where ShotSpotters are and whatnot, but it's like they're there for reasons, right? So we just don't put them up somewhere where there's some data that has been used in the past. That's why they're in certain spots. So I'm all about, listen, we'll give you I love the body cameras because I think, hey, you want something? Here you go. Here's a body camera. Here's what happened. Here's what didn't happen. And a lot of disputes have already been resolved once people come in and they make a report and they say, well, we got the body camera footage. You're not necessarily telling us the whole story, right? So that's reduced the number of complaints, and the equity audit in general, right? But one of the things that bothered me about it was the juvenile. They said that it was very strange, right? Like when we use our discretion, we're not making arrests, but when we don't use discretion, there's some laws we have no discretion over, right? Like you will arrest, you will do this. And especially if there's a victim, right? Yeah. There's only really, right? Is it one or two? I'm going to go with one. I can't remember, but there's really only one crime that we must arrest for. It says must, violation of a restraining order. Right? Every other one you can summons, you can criminal complaint, you can do whatever. But when there's a victim, right? Like, are we gonna summon someone in for a murder? Of course not, right? Are we gonna summons? But could we summons in for a trespass? Yeah, we could, right? We could do that instead of arresting the person. So there's some things that when we use our discretion. But then I also said with the juveniles that we had a bigger discrepancy of. I think minority juveniles are arrested, and I don't think it. And I believe they had access to this data because it didn't talk about the number of arrests per person, right? So it gave it a number, 30, let's say, right? Mm-hmm. But how many of those were the same individual more than once? Because I'm going to tell you, we run into the same individuals policing more times than not. They're the ones, it's not everybody in general. It's usually a minority of people that are causing the crimes and the chaos around the city. And we know who they are. So when they put in there, you arrested this many, like, well, how many were multiple arrests? How many were mandatory? How many were gun arrests? Like, they didn't tell you the type of arrest. They didn't tell you the number of times that maybe that person was in there twice or three times. And that's why I think that part was skewed. And people kind of hit on that about the number of juveniles. And I think that totally lacked enough information to really make that assessment of is that a problem here in the Worcester Police Fire? I'm going to say it is not. But the data that they showed said it was. And I think the data was flawed, the way they presented it for that juvenile arrests.
Yeah. I do remember there was some talk about that. I don't know. I mean, look, whatever age you are, certain things you do them, you are going to get arrested and good. I think, I think there's people that I'm really troubled when I see kids arrested, especially if they're 17 and they're going to get hit with, these cases, even in cases, a 14-year-old kid murders somebody, they go to jail for life. They're 14. They don't even know what end is up. Like that's
that. So that's where we're in the front. So we don't create the law.
I understand. I understand. Yeah.
And and I agree. I agree. We shouldn't. Listen, there's been plenty of times where I probably could have arrested a juvenile. I did not, right, for something.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Call their parents, send them on their way, do whatever you got to do, right? Because you don't want to do that, right? But when there's when they're violent crimes, right, and whether they're 14, 15, or 16, that's a whole nother discussion about that. But the whole part about the juveniles, and we know SROs, right? That was a big problem in the things, right? So, I believe that SROs have a place in the school system, right? Some people would not agree. We're not militarizing. We're not doing the school to prison pipeline. We're not there to arrest people. That's the last thing we want to do. I'm going to tell you is arrest somebody. It is truly.
So, and this kind of the what I said I wanted to get to at the end. This kind of fits into that. We shouldn't expect. We expect police officers to do way too much. The bulk of police work, like this idea that cops are going to prevent crime. What are they, magic? If you're in a place where a thing happens, it might not escalate, right? Because you're there. Presence is good, totally. But I think the vast majority is something is reported, you investigate and attempt to arrest the bad guy, whoever committed said crime, right? And that's what we should rely on police officers to do: investigate and arrest people when crimes have happened. Bernie Mac had a joke that he used to say, your wife wants to be your wife, your sister, your daughter, your pastor, your teacher and everything, right? And I think that kind of applies what we expect of police officers. I don't think police officers should be in schools because the crime hasn't happened. And we should not ask police officers to be a guidance counselor or a hallway monitor or whatever, mix of stuff.
Yeah, that's fair, because I agree on the other end that we shouldn't be doing things on the outside. So that's a fair statement. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the surprise I wanted to bring up for you. I wanted to try and make sense of defund for you, because I know police officers get a visceral reaction, and I understand it.
Sure.
It is not the most artful term. I didn't choose it. That term emerged from kind of frontline activists in places like LA, where their sheriff's department is deeply troubled. In New York, the New York Police Department has some serious issues. And so, from people like myself, I didn't want to go tell activists who were on the front lines of this, don't use that term. It doesn't work marketing wise. I should shut up and let them do their thing. And so I agree the term isn't artful. But the best way I've seen it explained was a cartoon, I think, in the New Yorker. And it was kind of like a before and after. And the before was a police officer carrying rocks, and they're piled up to infinite, right? And one is like, sex workers, and the next is drugs, and all these different things that you deal with. And the next one was like people helping push those rocks into different areas, right? Like, legalize and regulate, sex work, drugs, and like trying to take things off the back of police officers from being these, dealing with especially victimless crimes, right? Not that those things can certainly have victims, but trying to get out of this thing I think that we did kind of in the 90s of trying to criminalize damn near everything, right? And deal with some of these things in a better way. So and then of course, when you have a much reduced burden on police officers, then you have a funding source that you can, rather than in enforcement, you can deal with education and things that are cultural, that actually are effective in preventing people from whatever's driving them to commit crimes, right? Especially like property crimes or crimes of monetary gain, right? And so that's how we're
talking a big problem here.
So that's how a person who doesn't want to just scream at you would try to explain it, right? It's not about we're just going to take stuff from police officers. It should be about why are we asking them to do all this stuff? And if we ask them to investigate and find people who commit especially violent crime, a crime with victims, or we sometimes find ways to reduce that burden by, as I said, maybe legalizing some of this stuff. And every one of those things is its own conversation. But if we ask police officers to do less, then we need less enforcement, and then I think that law enforcement is largely reactive, and the attempt here is to get to something that's proactive. So that's how something
we also want to be proactive, right? Which you do try to be proactive in the communities to help prevent crime before it happens. Yeah. So we're part of that solution too. So I totally agree with much of what you said about taking that rocks out of our sacks, not making us being the Swiss Army knife of every community, right?
Social worker and teacher, and
listen, I'm going to tell you this. I said it from day one when they came out. Mental health issues, right? I don't believe that we should show up there in a uniform. I think many times people think you come to arrest them when they're having a mental health crisis or something, and we could escalate a situation just by our presence, by not doing anything else, but other than just being there. Some of our CIT though that we do deal with the community, they've gone to a soft uniform, right? So it doesn't have all the gear and everything like that, right? Yeah. But also, I'm going to say this: so the police department has hired 2 workers that are supposed to go out and do some of these mental health things and respond to calls that we shouldn't be going to all the time. I'll say this: I don't think they're doing their job, but we can talk more on that later, Tom. But I don't know if you're aware of that. Like the city hired some people to go do this, and unfortunately, they're still going to the majority of the calls. I don't know why.
Is this the CHL thing you're talking about?
Yeah, they're at the Worcester Police Department. They're supposed to.
Okay. Yeah. So
to go out and respond to calls.
I haven't, and I now will start asking questions. Lieutenant Murtha is going to be thrilled that you brought this up. But
I don't think they're doing their job, right? Where people want this, and we've done it. The city has done it, but is it effective? I don't know.
So I have no idea if what the effectiveness has been here. I do know that it is. I think Denver was one of the first cities that moved to something like this, and they say it's been very effective. So
it's a commitment from the city with funding and resourcing.
Right.
Many times, I think that we depend on some of these partners that say they'll do these things, and they get money from the city or grants or whatnot, and they're not necessarily living up to their end of the bargain.
Yeah, and is that are we asking them to make something out of too little, or are they not doing it? Are we not supporting it? Like, there's a lot of questions to answer there.
I'm very familiar with the Denver program. I looked into it. I'm a member of the International Chiefs of Police, and they brought that up at one of the conferences. And it seems it's a model program, actually, I think. So
yeah. So from afar, it seems like it has a lot of support. Now that it's been in effect at least a few years. I'm sure there's detractors, but looking at from here, looking at the news, seems like it has a lot of support. So if they're doing it, if they can do it right, then we're doing it wrong. If it's not working, let's fix it.
Yeah. Right. Well, how did they do it? The people. This is what I always say like, we're not the first to do anything. Like, we're not inventing anything new when we come to the city, right? Maybe we should, but we don't, right? But so there's a lot of great policies. There's a lot of great programs that we could look at here. They might not fit Worcester exactly, but how can we take that framework and then put it here in the city? I always look at policies from other departments, from other communities, like when we're talking policies in the policy working groups in the police department. Like, how do they do it? How's it work there, right? So I think we can do the same thing with some of these programs. And how do they do it? How do they fund it? How do they get this? How do they do that, right? And then what's our priorities in the city? I don't know. Sometimes I don't know. I've lived here for my whole life, Tom.
Yeah. Ain't that the truth? It's a strange place. Yeah, I mean, I think too. There was a similar something that kind of resembles these facts here. I'm thinking of a different case from outside the city. Mm-hmm. A police officer, an autistic child, somehow, sure. Their mental health is mm-hmm. have mental health disabilities, yep. And they're having a meltdown, and don't want to leave a public bathroom or something, if I remember correctly. Obviously having some issues, and a police officer arrives and was like, do this. And when they didn't, was like, well, you're going to jail, and just started manhandling the kid. And it looks awful because it's clearly, somebody who has disabilities. We shouldn't be putting him in that situation.
I believe that. Well, we do get autistic training. We've got autistic training in the police department forever. We have a police officer that comes in that works for the state that has multiple autistic children. He does all the training actually in Massachusetts. Only a few people that actually do this. They're growing, but so he's great. And then if the police officer doesn't know the person's autistic, whatnot, and again, you're right, we shouldn't be there, because what do they give? Like, they give us certain tools and training for certain situations, and and like you said, since we're the Swiss Army knife, what situation am I in now? I got to do this, and I got to change over to this guy. I got to put on my priest collar, right? Instead of when I just came from a call where I was just assaulted, right? Like, right. So it's you're right, absolutely right, and I agree with you. There's a way to do it without taking needed resources away from the police, right? Because we want to be out there just in the city of Worcester. Hey, we need more enforcement. We absolutely do. We need more cops to do this enforcement. But we're doing all these other things also. So if we need more traffic enforcement, or we need more drug enforcement, how do we do that with the resources we currently have? So we have to figure out, they have to put money from somewhere. I'm not sure where the city council wants to prioritize their funding, where the city manager wants to prioritize his funding for these societal issues to get at that root cause.
Yeah. And I think setting people with disabilities aside, especially mental health disabilities, I think a lot of the root cause is economic, right? I mean, there is some truth, I think, to white collar crime is difficult to prosecute and all of that, so it's not paid a lot of attention to when it should be. Look, DAs across the country campaign on convictions, and poor people are easier to convict because they don't have any money for a lawyer, right? So I think that there's some really problematic push and pull and incentives built into the system that are really troubling. But I mean, the bottom line is, you receive training to deal with that and 45 other things. And what is it, once a year? Like, I think that a higher level of specialty and less things is probably a good idea, right?
We're trying to do like our
situations where your core competency is. Yeah.
We're trying to, we do try to do this. So we have the specialty units. We have our CIT unit where they're just doing that. They're just going out and they're working with those people with mental health, the homeless, the addicts and whatnot, trying to help them. That's all they do all day long. They work with CHL. They work with the courts, drug court. That's what they do, right? We have our traffic or accident reconstruction. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of accidents lately, so they've been very busy. Because if they're not out doing recon, they would normally be out doing some other type of enforcement. But unfortunately, it's been this way. Now the chief is like, hey, we're going to reallocate some resources to get to more enforcement. We're trying to do those specialties, but again, we have limited resources to do that. Our officers want to do some of that. We have a lot of great people that want to get out there and do those, and there's a lot of great people coming on the job that are very smart, have some degrees, speak multiple languages. In the last several years, like, our department has become so diverse. These young officers that are coming on now, I think it's great, right? We have more women than we've had in years. So I think you're going to see changes in policing and how we do business, but it's all about that resourcing piece, right? Giving us the proper resources, and it's not just about money; it's about equipment, it's about whatever, right? Yeah. And there's things the city can do and the state can do to help us, right? There's things that they can do. Like, the state doesn't want to, everybody's afraid of Big Brother, but I'm all about having traffic cameras on lights, light poles.
That's going to be a fight.
So if you go through a stop sign, you're going to get a ticket. Like, that's going to stop a lot of people from speeding. It's going to stop people when they start getting tickets in the mail.
No, I agree. I'm concerned that on that subject that road design and education. The city manager talks about the kind of three pillars: road design, education, and enforcement. I do have a lot of concern that the priority there is going to get switched. Look, I don't think anybody benefits from having a whole bunch of otherwise unnecessary traffic stops, which are stressful for all involved.
Yeah.
You know, anything can, I get it. Like you're walking up to a car, anything, you know, who knows what's about to happen, good, bad, or indifferent.
It's the most dangerous thing a police officer does.
And so
Go into a domestic incident and then stop in a motor vehicle.
Right. And you know, when everybody in the situation's nervous, that's how situations escalate and bad stuff happens. So I am a little concerned that the 30 is going to become the firsty and we're just going to pull a bunch of people over. One way to avoid that is, as you said, traffic cameras. But from what I understand, somebody told me this, I don't remember it. When those were implemented, there was a whole bunch of guarantees that that's not what they were never going to be used for that. And so if we're now,
I don't think we have the ability. The current ones we have, I don't think they have the proper ability to do those. You'd have to get a whole nother system. They do it in Rhode Island. They do it in they do it in a lot of other states. I think those ones we have up there are more for traffic management currently.
Yes.
More than what we're talking about.
But there was a lot of concern.
Another system.
Right. When those were implemented, there was a lot of concern about, the next step is going to be, you know, writing tickets. And so there was from what I understand, I don't remember it. It was before I was so in tune to kind of the city politics. But from what I understand, there was a lot of discussion about, okay, we'll go along with this, but they're never going to be used for that. Right. And so if then there starts a discussion about we're going to be basically maybe not those cameras specifically, but we're going to do that, it's going to be a war. Because
you can't do it in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts anyways. Right. They'd have to pass it at the legislative level. So,
and I promise you last thing, because I told you an hour and here we are to an hour.
Oh, good. I like talking, man. We have good conversations.
My friend Gary Rosen, who I told him recently that all of the terrible votes that I think he took when he was a counselor are forgiven, because he is on a crusade for opioid prevention centers, safe injection sites. Mm-hmm. There's two in New York now. I think a statistic that will resonate with a lot of folks, and maybe with you, those two centers called emergency response like 5 times in their first year and served, it's New York City. They've served tens of thousands of people. And there was a few instances they actually had to call 911, and it was about 1% of the time they had actually administered Narcan, right? Mm-hmm. You can't get better if you're dead, right? So that's my 2-second pitch on. I think I know it's state law, and
I guess my question for that is, how many people got better? Are they just being used so they don't, that's just the place to go so I can continue with my drug use? Or am I actually, I know they're supposed to be wraparound services and whatnot there, but what are their metrics of actually having these type of safe injection sites? And then actually what's their metrics of getting those people into some type of a recovery, a long-term recovery? I feel that as a society in general, and I have addiction in my family, right? I feel that society in general, like we do not do a good job in the recovery phase with our addiction people. The homes that are out there, the recovery, that they go in the step down process and whatnot. I think a lot of it's money grabs from certain agencies, and they're just not doing a very good job. So safe injection sites, I get it. It saves lives. Okay. But what else is it? Is it just saying, hey, drug use is good, you can come here and keep on using it? Or what are the number of people that they're actually getting out of that lifestyle? Because that's really another metric that needs to be looked at. Not just, we have only had 3 ambulance calls because they safely injected themselves with heroin. Like, I'm sorry, like I don't agree with that.
So I think a couple other really important points is they'll test your stuff for you. So if you just bought heroin and it's riddled with fentanyl, you're going to know that, and that avoids what would certainly be an overdose.
So, I guess the question is, we're going through all this trouble and we're doing all this, we're putting all this money and resources. Would you just legalize it?
I think it's a different conversation.
I just say legalize it, tax it. I don't know, right? Did it with marijuana.
Yeah. Well. So I'm sure, as you know, what Narcan does, it brings you back from the dead, but it also sends you into the user into instant withdrawal. and that's a pretty good time to have a conversation with somebody about maybe it's time to work on this, right? And also again, it's New York City, would be different here, but in New York City, the sheer amount of what they call hazardous waste that they disposed of, which wasn't in parks, et cetera, I think is, even if you're one of these people that think all alex should die, and we have some of those in the city, unfortunately,
Yep.
there are aspects of this that are good for society in general. And it wasn't just recovery that they were referring people to services. I mean, it was jobs and, a range of services, right? Forcing somebody into rehab is not going to work. But having a place
should
where,
we, as a society, I don't know, right? This is what I always say, right? Like I say, where does someone's other rights end and my rights begin in these type of social society issues, right? Whether it's mental health, whether it's drugs, I've been all over the country. I was in San Diego. I think they have a big mental health problem there with their homelessness. The people that I've seen on the street that I felt very bad for, they were definitely mental health issues more than drug use. But like, what are we doing with these people? Like, why are we letting them exist like this? And why are we not taking them and making them take their medication, making them do this, giving them jobs, and then make them come back and live at a home where they're taking their medication and they're working, they have jobs, they're doing things, they become actually parts of society, because many of them just off their meds or whatever, right? I don't know. I just think that we're just not doing a very good job at that. In all aspects of that. And, when I look at Mass and Cass, right, and, they tried that safe injection zones down there, and it was not good.
It was a bad scene. Yeah, that's the absolute wrong way to do it. There was a op-ed in I'm gonna forget the senator again. I always do this, but it was a state senator who was not my ideological brother. He's a Democrat, but I would call him far right. On the right spectrum, if you're of the Democrats. And I'm just blanking on his name, but he visited the two in New York, and he went to Canada. They've been in Canada for some years. And I think it was one of the ones in New York. He said he couldn't find it, and he had the address. And so, I think people are concerned about storefront, come do your drugs here, and that's not what they do, right?
Yeah.
And he also remarked, like, the neighborhood around these places wasn't destroyed, right? There wasn't people everywhere, there wasn't needles everywhere, because I think the draw to these places is they know they can go do their thing, and they're not going to get arrested or robbed, right?
Right.
And safe injection sites is not a direct line to rehab, but it is a piece. It is the first stage of recovery. And again, in the most extreme circumstances, somebody that's just been shoved into withdrawal by Narcan, having somebody there who just brought them back to life, who knows how to talk to them, who knows how to identify people that come in that are signs of maybe this, maybe it's worth having a conversation with this person. I strongly believe it will, keep more people alive, to give them the chance.
Hey, listen, I'm with you. Yeah, absolutely. Especially
I do think that ultimately, and this is probably impossible to measure, but I think ultimately you will help more people get better.
Well, I mean, again, you got to have to see what the, the metrics of it, right? And, like I said, we have the people out there. There's someone actually chiming in here, but they, and we have these programs that are out there trying to assist, right? But are they really working? That's the thing. Like, what are the metrics? What are the metrics we're trying to do right here? And you talk about Narcan and somebody, listen, we've Narcan people, and they just get up and they tell us to beat feet, right?
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm out, whatever. But we make sure they get the medical attention, because, just one thing at Narcan, they could quickly go back into where they OD in again, right? But they don't want our help. Now, maybe because we're wearing a uniform, maybe that's why.
I mean, you can send them to jail.
We're talking about those other services. Like, hey, listen, I haven't done, is there a lot of metrics and research on do those safe injection sites work? There's a lot of, I think there's some research from some other countries, right?
There is. I think
minor research here.
Yeah, so Governor Baker had a I think it was called the Harm Reduction Committee or something.
Yeah, harm reduction. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They did a study in 2019, and they said then the study came out. Their report rather came out in 2019, and they said it was 100 of these worldwide, and as far as we know, no one's ever died in one. Right. And that's a powerful stat.
It is. However, I also want to know is there epidemic like our epidemic? There's of people that we believe are,
Yeah.
addicts in our country compared to them. Like, I don't know, right? I don't know. There's a lot of different, to me, there's a lot of questions. And I'm just not a big safe injection site person because of, I think that we just don't do a good job overall with helping our,
No, we don't.
helping our homeless, helping our mental health, and helping those with addiction, especially after we send them to our, we get them off the street. We put them into a detox. Then, they're there for whatever, 7-10 days, maybe. Then hopefully they get a step down to like, I forget the next place, but like this, and then maybe a house or whatever. Right. But, and a lot of it they have to do themselves. And I totally get that. But, but then sometimes when they get into these so-called sober houses, I think that's where there's still problems in that arena.
Absolutely.
Some are more reputable than others.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that the other kind of sell point on this for Worcester is, unless I'm unaware of it, AIDS Project Worcester has pretty much smashed everything that it's done. And they said they'll do this tomorrow. Just let us.
They did a great job down in Main South. They did a great job
with COVID. I don't know how many needles they
got.
One
of those organizations that the city gave a whole bunch of money to, and the people got the grants. That is a success story, in my opinion. Right. So
yeah. So if you don't mind, I have the report from New York. When you have a chance, just glance through it. Statistically, I found it very impressive. Yep. The number of people versus, emergency calls. I brought that up first because, I don't know. I can't imagine how many calls, Worcester police officers are going to on a daily basis that they're administering Narcan. I'm sure, a ton.
Our offices replenish their Narcan quite regularly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And so, there is an aspect of maybe offloading some of that from the police department, but I'll send you the report when you have a chance.
I love reading all those things, and I don't know, I'll have more questions for you.
Outside of my pet issue of the city charter.
Yes, I'll put you on that one too.
Yeah. Yes. Especially, was pretty hard hit here in the city compared to the rest of the state. This seems like the right place to try and pilot this. The one thing I will say is, I believe that at least the ones that I know have looked at, like Vancouver's, I think was the first in Canada, and it's, I don't know, 10 years old or something, maybe a little bit more than that. Yeah. But if you look around at where these places are, population density is much different. They're bigger cities. New York's right. Population density in New York City is infinitely higher than here, right? Crazy, and it's so about where you're going to put this thing so people can get to it. I'm with Gary Rosen on his crusade. I think we'll certainly save lives and hopefully get more people on the path to getting better.
That'll be the big question, Tom. When we do a pilot, where are they going to put it? Because the NIMBYs that want to support, then they'll come out and say, well, not here.
Yeah, and I would just say, let's look at a distribution map of, where the deaths have occurred and where that is most. Just put it there. Put it where people can get to it, for God's sake.
Yeah. I don't know, like, if the registry building is still being used for housing or not. I have no idea, actually. That might
the shelter closed.
That might be a spot, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate your take on that.
I may be against it on the surface. I'll read your article, right? I'm very open to, as I always tell you. But hey, listen, like, some things are tried and they don't work. And then whatever, you go back to the drawing board. So maybe it is worth a shot, but I'll read about it.
You're skeptical. I get it.
And maybe because of my profession. Right. But I definitely read those things. And I always, one thing I've always done is I'm very cognizant of my changing and trying not to have a bias in a certain way.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried to float the, things that are, that apply to, the city at large, right? Everyone, these people that have these, horrible thoughts about people that are suffering from addiction, and say, just kill them all, or whatever, people love to say things on the internet. Yeah. But I've tried to like, well, do you like needles in playgrounds? Because this will help stop that, right?
Yeah.
Do you like, somebody relieve themselves on a storefront, or somebody's mid stride walking down the street, passed out mid stride? Like,
Oh, I know.
do you enjoy all this? Because this can mitigate some of that. And oh, by the way, it might help some people get better. But those people.
That's the key. If it helps them get better, right, and we can do something real good that comes out of it, not just give them a place that's safe to inject or to use drugs, but actually save people. When I say save people, not just with Narcan, but saving them from that lifestyle if possible. That's a win. That's a win.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, it's it is a place that somebody can come and into somewhere clean, have clean, especially if they're injecting, have clean needles and all. It certainly is that. The key is
spread hepatitis. Hepatitis is huge right now. People don't really realize that, but hepatitis is on the rise, and maybe it has to do with some of that, that shit.
Yeah, but if it is, so it is that for sure. But if it's only that, that's doing it wrong for sure.
No. Right.
Yeah. I appreciate that you doing this. I never thought in a million years that you and I would actually get along at any level.
Because people had a bad impression of me, Tom. We talked about this, right? Rick Cipro, people may not know, whatever, I ran for council and people had this different idea of me. I'm a cop, right? And that's what thing, right? So, and I talk about people have biases, and I talk about your own biases, your own blind spots. Like when I was running for, you're a cop. Well, that's not who I am. That's my job, right?
Yeah.
And I've been around the world. All right. And I've been a lot of places and I've been in a lot of situations, and, this is right. So we got to talking, right. And we're like, now we're going to we'll have a beer together for crying out loud.
I don't drink beer, but I can find a mixed drink I like.
Right.
I mean, I told you this the last time we talked, that the infamous Board of Health meeting, previous leadership was playing the issue of, race and police interaction in a way that wasn't helpful. And I think it kind of sets you up in that, scenario to fail. And that was obviously very heavily scrutinized, that whole conversation. So I don't think that did you any favors. I think I think that somebody who had investigated the cases of, discipline cases that involve racism, saying that he's never seen racism, really tainted the whole conversation as far as the police department goes. And you happened to be in the room at the time. So, but yeah, I appreciate you doing this. I
love to do it anytime. If you do panels or anything, I'd love to be on those type of things.
And I'd also just like to send a message to the man known as Q. Call me anti-police now, jerk.
The Q man. Okay.
Thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate you doing this.
Tom, thank you very much. And let's stay in contact, please.